Cade Klubnik admitted he hasn't watched LSU film in 5 months, and that might be the most confident thing he's ever done at Clemson. That's all coming up right now on Locked On Clemson.
You are Locked On Clemson, your daily podcast on the Clemson Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Tiger fans? Morgan Thomas here, Clemson fan, Clemson grad, host and producer of Locked On Clemson, part-time host and producer over on 105.5 FM, The Roar. Thank you so much for making Locked On Clemson your first listen every day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And if you're new to the show, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And if you're an everydayer, you know how we do it here on Locked On, exclusive Clemson content every single week. And you don't forget to follow me in between episodes over on X at the Morgan T Show, where we can talk about all things Clemson whenever and however you want. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Coming up, we're going to talk about Cade Klubnik, a little bit of national championship talk, and Brian Kelly discussion as well. Starting us off, Cade Klubnik, speaking to the Manning Passing Academy, explained that he is intentionally avoiding over-prepping for his first matchup of the season, saying, quote, "I don't like to watch the LSU film," inserted there, for 5 months, because when you get to game day, you start overthinking everything. And that is a shift in mentality. It's not about cramming. It's not about overloading your information. It's about clarity and controlling what you can control. This, to me, is a very confident quarterback who's not intimidated by the moment, who really is not circling it maybe as much as fans are this first game of the season. Cade Klubnik knows exactly what he's doing, and he's trusting his preparation and the plan from Dabo Swinney to Garrett Riley to even his own personal plan more than all of the hype that can happen towards this one game. And we're going to hype it up here on Locked On Clemson. I know Locked On LSU, they're going to be hyping it up as well over there. I know that the national media will be hyping it up too. So there's going to be a lot of outside noise for Cade Klubnik, but it's kind of nice to see him talking about not over prepping. You know, if you overload yourself, you may be very good and be very efficient, but your critical thinking skills seem to historically go away as the more you prep after initial understanding. And so you don't want to just overdo it, because that leads to overthinking, and that leads to lack of action and lack of critical thinking in the moment. And you may need to be able to do that when you get under stress. When you get under stress, you're going to fall back on what your training has brought to you. And that's what Cade needs to do. But he needs to also play very loose when he's out there on the football field as well, because he's the type of player that does better when he's playing, not trying to be perfect. You know, when he's playing more fluid, more loose out there, running the football, having confidence in himself. That's the kind of Cade Klubnik you want to see, versus one who's overthinking everything, maybe trying to overachieve, maybe trying to win the game all by himself. As I say those things, you're probably thinking, that's the Cade that I don't want. And that's exactly right. You don't want that type of Cade Klubnik. You want one that is more confident, more relaxed, and more loose with his play style. Now, to me, he's already getting started on that mental edge. You know, a lot of football doesn't get talked about, but the mental edge really does matter. Now, it matters to have the better team, talent-wise, for sure. But it's one thing to prepare for a team, but as he mentioned, preparing for a team for 5 months, that would be more of an obsession over LSU or any opponent that you would be facing in week 1 or week 2, whatever it may be. you don't want to obsess over your opponent. You want to focus on what you can control. And when you have such a long off season, sometimes you can get too eager to get into the film and into the game prep when it's really not something that you really should do. Now, typically in a football season, you're not really even game prepping, but the week of the game, you're focused on the current game of the week, the current opponent of the week. Your staff may be moved on to the next game of the week, but you are focused on that current opponent. So Cade Klubnik not getting too involved too early, keeping his mind fresh, keeping himself focused. And, I think this will help him throughout the full part of the season. I feel as if this will help him not just against LSU, but against everyone he faces, because he's got 12-game regular season. This to me is also an emotional take, or a mature take, excuse me, and not as an emotional take, but a leadership take, a mature take for Cade Klubnik. Someone who has, not always had the best season openers. In week one starts, he's not been the best. And he's looking to turn those things around. I talked about LSU not having a good first week. They're kind of going a different route about it. They, I think, are 0-5 in first round matchups or first week matchups, and 0-3 with Brian Kelly. And so they're trying to really focus on it. They're talking about it publicly, nationally. They have it posted all over their locker rooms. They have it circled on their calendars. They're taking hey, we're going to talk about it more than any other game out there. Cade's, on the other hand, is kind of taking a different approach, even though he also needs the marquee wins. I've mentioned to you that he has the talent, he has the players around him, but the biggest thing is he has to win those marquee games that are on his schedule. He's been able to perform well in a lot of the difficult games of his season, the most challenging games, but he hasn't had much success winning those games. So he needs to be able to flip that script. And this season is the best season he's going to have by far to do that. Obviously, it makes it much easier to have home field advantage for the first game of the season as well. Starting off the year in Death Valley and against LSU, the Clemson fan base is going to be absolutely on fire for this game. And it's going to matter in the game. And it's going to help not only Cade Klubnik, but the defense and the entire team to be able to overcome an SEC matchup in the very, very first game of the season. The Death Valley is going to hopefully energize Cade Klubnik, not amp him up too much. It help him jump out early and often against the Tigers. Now, I think maybe if you wanted to say, if you're on the other side of things, you might say that Cade should be thinking about LSU a little bit more. But, there is a point about being preparing too much, right? I get early preparation, but early preparation, too much of it or too early of it, doesn't really equal success. As I mentioned, you can overtrain on things to a point where, you're very efficient in what you had planned, but you're not very good at thinking outside the box at that point. You're not also very good at thinking critically either. So he's got to be able to balance it. Clemson has struggled in their opening season games, same as LSU. And I picked on LSU, but really Clemson's record hasn't been that good in the past couple of years in their first game of the season. So starting off strong this year is going to be really a huge catalyst for the team. But it's not just about preparing. It's about getting out on the field, believing that you can do it, taking advantage of your opportunities and being a leader out on that field, showing what you can really do in a contract year for Cade Klubnik. And Cade Klubnik now showing that his leadership ability is front and center. This is the most focused Cade I've seen since he's been with Clemson. If he plays as calm and as sharp as he is coming off with the press, then this August, the late August, could be the start of a very, very big season for Cade and the Clemson Tigers. All right, coming up next, we're going to talk about how Clemson checks out 3 of the 4 big-time championship boxes. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. I know I have many times. And that's exactly where Gametime comes into play. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without all the stress. With the money you save on tickets, hey, guess what? You can go buy a little bit of food, a little bit of drink, merchandise, maybe even invite some more friends with you and have a bigger group to go check out the game. Gametime makes all of this stuff possible. Gametime makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app, if you notice and you track them, they actually drop as you get closer to the first pitch or the start of the game. They've got incredible last-minute deals. So keep checking up on that app. Download it and check up on it. You get clear seat views so you know exactly where you're going to be sitting and where you're picking for that ticket. And you get a low price guarantee so you don't have to worry about buying anything and being in the dark about anything. And again, what I love is those last minute deals for the zones. There's these zone deals that you can get like 10% off. And it's really awesome. And with the FIFA World Cup coming up and those matchups, they have these exclusive zone deals that you're going to get better deals than anywhere else. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. CBS Sports recently broke down the trends of national champions over the past decade. And almost all teams had some shared attributes about them. Similar traits, if you will. They've had 4 similar traits that all of them have been able to share. One, they were top 13 finished the year before. So in the rankings in the previous season, they were top 13, which doesn't necessarily indicate success for the future, but it shows that you had something to get you there. Now, in the transfer portal era, may be more difficult to follow that because, you can rebuild a team very quickly or reload a team very quickly. But a top 13 finish shows that you've got some sort of, you would hope, some sort of foundation built for the next season. And you're not just losing everybody. But you're returning also 3 of 4, either a head coach, an offensive coordinator, a defensive coordinator, and a quarterback with starting experience. Now that kind of bodes pretty well for Clemson because, they have a head coach that they're returning, right? And Dabo Swinney has been on the team for many years now. So you're not really worried about Clemson in any way returning a head coach. Another thing is that you have not only the head coach returning for Clemson, but you have the offensive coordinator returning for Clemson. So Garrett Riley is there. So that's 2 out of the 4. You have Cade Klubnik with a lot of starting experience now. So that puts you 3 out of the 4. The defensive coordinator is not someone who was on the team last season. So unfortunately, they do not check that box. They check 3 out of the 4 in that area. Head coach, offensive coordinator, quarterback with experience but they don't with the defensive coordinator, even though I think none of us would even argue the fact that Tom Allen is a huge improvement over Wes Goodwin. We don't know that for sure, but that's what we assume. We have a lot of prior results to kind of prove that will be the case, and we have a lot of good feedback so far from assistant coaches and players and leaders on the team so far. So we feel that even though he wasn't a returning defensive coordinator for Clemson, he's got a great culture fit. He's doing the right things to build back on the fundamentals for the team. And he is just a better coach all around because he's been a former head coach, former defensive coordinator. So he got a lot more experience than a guy who was brought from the film room. Now, did Clemson finish in the top 13 the previous year before? Depends on where you look. The AP Top 25 poll had Clemson at 14th at 10-4 overall. So not top 13. If you look at the coaches poll, Clemson was actually 11th overall. So in that scenario, it would probably be better to say that Clemson finished you could say they finished in the top, I would say top 13. Now, one was 14, one was 11. We'll split the difference with you, 12.5. So I do think that Clemson checks those boxes. But to me, while that is fun to talk about, that as I'm saying it to you, I want to acknowledge that it is just some off-season random statistical things that we are talking about because we can't talk about the game right now. So it's great that Clemson has returning leaders. Don't get me wrong. Cade Klubnik, Garrett Riley, Dabo Swinney. The program is on a good trajectory for 2025. Stability at all of the critical spots and improvement in hiring at the defensive coordinator position. Clemson has a lot of returning production as well, ranking number 1 in returning production according to Bill Connolly from ESPN, including guys like Cade Klubnik, Peter Woods, TJ Parker, Antonio Williams. The team, as you know, as a Clemson fan, is loaded. I mean, this is the team of all teams that Dabo's had in the past 5 years. This is the one that you should be most excited about. We all agree with that. And last year's ranking, while not exactly the way the stats would want you to say, they fit pretty doggone good with what we're with the narrative we're trying to spew out there. So now you could say, hey, this is all statistical stuff and all kind of like off-season hype. And I would agree with you. I would, But it is kind of nice to be a team that's not going through a lot of drama, not going through a lot of turnover or turmoil, and is kind of having the back to the jewel of the national media. They're the hot team. They're the good pick. They're the ones that are going to go make the run. They have a harder regular season, in my opinion. And I mentioned this on the recent ACC squad show. Playing teams like SMU, revenge game, Syracuse, payback game, LSU, big-time SEC matchup, South Carolina, big-time SEC matchup, Florida State, never know what you're going to get from them, transfer portal U. And then a Friday night away game at Louisville. Don't forget Georgia Tech, an away game early on in the season as well. This season, Duke as well. This season is a difficult one, in my opinion, for Clemson to go by undefeated. I do feel like that they will probably drop one game, but they are definitely a hot team with a lot of momentum and a lot of hype from the national media. They've got the coaching, they've got the quarterback, they've got the talent. And thanks to this expanded playoff, one loss like I'm thinking might happen, not going to kill their chances at all. Play the long game. A lot of people in the chat mentioned to me, play the long game when it comes to the LSU game. I was talking about that it's a must-win game. To me, it's a must-win game for Cade and his narrative and his perception of how good he is. But you definitely can get by with a stubbing your toe at the beginning of the season with the expanded playoff the way it is. But we all know this. I love spreadsheets. I love charts. But championship teams aren't built on charts and spreadsheets and roster management. They're built on talent, belief, stability, and what can you do to get yourself to a point where you can make a late season run and be healthy for that kind of run. Clemson's built for the moment. Their roster is as good as it's going to be, I think, with Cade Klubnik at the helm, and their coaching staff is as good as it's going to be as well. We'll have to wait and see if they can actually make it all the way to the end. But I think Clemson is got a better chance than most out there to do it. All right, we're going to finish up the show talking about Brian Kelly and why he can't afford to lose to Clemson either. Now, I've mentioned this to you. If you're an everydayer, you're not surprised by what I'm telling you here, but Brian Kelly is definitely under more pressure than Dabo Swinney. You know, Dabo got under a little bit of pressure a couple of years ago with Tyler from Spartanburg and all that trash that came out and all the frustration. And a lot of it was actually warranted, but the frustration of Dabo getting Clemson to the promised land and then seeming to kind of like fall off pretty quick. But the fall off that we were griping about was still a 10-win season, you know, so put it all in perspective, not as bad as what many have had to endure. It's dangerous for Brian Kelly right now because he has to start the season off after having a lot, not winning any opening games as a coach for LSU. LSU struggling 5 years in a row now in opening games. He has to go on the road to actually play Clemson in their hometown, in their home stadium in Death Valley, Memorial Stadium. Georgia never would do it. Georgia is going to play you in a neutral site. They're going to play you in Alabama. They're going to play you in Atlanta. They're going to play you in Charlotte, and they're going to have most of the fans there. They're going to make sure of that. They are not. Georgia Bulldogs not going to play you in your house. So LSU being able to do that, I admire that. However, that is a very dangerous spot for Brian Kelly because he's coming in on a true away game at the beginning of the season with a roster that is one of the most veteran, if not the most veteran, as far as returning production team in the country that has everything they need to be able to strike early, fast, and often and start the 2025 season off with big time talent, scoring, and results. Now, there are high expectations. This is now year 3 with Brian Kelly. You would think that in a college football world, this would be kind of the year where things start to pay off. This is year 3 with Cade Klubnik. As Clemson fans were thinking, this has kind of got to be the year where it has to pay off, right? But after missing the playoffs last year for LSU, the pressure is starting to get a little bit more on what Brian Kelly can do with all the hype that he came with, leaving Notre Dame, shockingly. There are starting to be a little bit of doubts here and there inside the LSU fan base. You know, Brian Kelly was brought in to not just win a few games, not just have a winning season, not even just win the SEC. Brian Kelly was brought in to win recruiting battles, to get a very talented roster, and to ultimately win national championship games. If LSU stumbles out of the gate, well, it's not going to be a killer for your season, as we've talked about with Clemson. But questions will continue to grow because it'll be yet again a first game of the season, an opening game that he lost. Yet again, a ranked game that he lost. And also, nobody in the SEC likes to lose out of conference games. If you talk to them, they act like they win every out of conference game. Every team has that feeling. But if you lose the first game of the season, the doubts are going to continue to grow in the LSU fan base and in their staff. Clemson's got, to me, all the advantage that you could want. They have a quarterback that's calm, cool, and collected. They've got a loaded roster with a bunch of returning stars. They've got a home game, a true home game, the beginning of the season. If Clemson wins, it's going to set the narrative off, not just for the Tigers being back to a national championship expectation, but it'll be setting up Cade Klubnik for a future for a Heisman Trophy run. Meanwhile, if LSU loses, there'll be a lot of doubt cast onto them about what was the actual ceiling for Brian Kelly. I don't think Brian Kelly's going to be really on the hot seat after week 1, as some of the articles are talking about. To me, it'd be obvious that he's not having to worry about that. But perception is not easy to go away. I always say, if someone shows you who they are, believe them. Well, we've seen a few years in a row now Brian Kelly struggling to reach that level that he was hired to. Are they having bad seasons? No, not really. But to reach the level that he was hired to. A Clemson loss may not completely ruin his playoff hopes, but it will be a huge blow to the fan base and to their confidence level. A major early hit, and it could be that way for Clemson as well, too. That's why Clemson scheduled this game. They need not just a challenge, they need a statement opportunity. Clemson has always enjoyed scheduling difficult opponents in the beginning of the season, and many of those being SEC opponents. Unlike last year, though, against Georgia, they get this time at home, and I think that that's going to be a huge advantage for Clemson in orange, the Tigers in orange. LSU has a lot riding on this game. Both teams really do. But we're seeing out the gate Brian Kelly saying this game has been circled. This game is in all the bathrooms and all the locker rooms and all the weight rooms. Everything is focused on this. LSU has more to lose, but Clemson has a lot to prove as well. This is going to be one of the hypest games out there. And if Lee Corso wasn't retiring, it probably would be the game that would be the game day game, but he's going to go to Ohio State because it's his last game. And, he's going to probably put on the Buckeye head and wrap up a great career, a historic career. But we know that Clemson LSU is probably the hypest game out there in week 1. Everything's going to be on the line. The hungrier team, the more prepared team, the more talented team, I think, will win the game. But it doesn't hurt to be on the side of the team on the side that has the home field advantage as well. Tiger fans are going to be able to be involved early and often. And I cannot wait for the end of August, because we're here at the end of June now, getting ready for July, this coming Tuesday, July 1st. We don't have much time left, and the 2025 season will be underway, and I'm so excited to share it with you here on Locked On. For my everydayers, I know you're still here with me. Thank you so much. We're at about 30 minutes now. You are the true Iron Men and women out there. Thank you so much for sticking with me through the show. Every single week we have shows. Thank you. Thank you for making Locked On Clemson your first listen today. For your second listen, check out my friend Brian Smith over on the Portal Show. He has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. Find the Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And as always, Tiger fans, we'll see you in July next week, and we'll see you at the top of the hill.